session. And the first thing on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. If you would all stand and join me. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next item on the agenda is the report on the closed session agenda items. The board took no action during the closed session, so that's simple enough. Correspondence. The only correspondence that we have today is a letter from Dr. Brescia to address to myself and Superintendent Smith. He expresses some concern about minimum reserves for economic uncertainty, and we will specifically address that issue later in the meeting when Scott has a report on that on next year, and looking forward to next year's budget. And I think that's in there as part of your superintendent's report. Next item on the agenda.
Well, can we make any comments on that?
Sure.
As far as the multi-year projection, it does, that concern I've mentioned before too. And it's more than just moving money around. I know later on we're going to talk about moving money, but still, just because we can move money and make the reserves look better, that concerns me.
Okay.
I can have that, that's my opinion.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is a review and approval of the minutes. Do we have a request to approve the minutes, or a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve them.
I'll second.
So we have a motion and a second to approve the minutes. Are there any comments or requested amend the minutes?
I do.
Yes.
In the board member reports, when it says, the last line for my report, it says, today she attended a meeting at Rancho El Chorro, which is true, but it was the budget perspective workshop. So I would just like that stated. And then later on, when we got to developer fees, in this discussion, I did not ask for a motion to rescind. It was talked about, but I didn't ask for that. And I'm also a little bit just questioning, you brought up the minutes last month about the level of detail that would and would not be in it. I understand that our board policy says the names of individuals in the topic, but Carrie McDonald and Gretchen Ross talked more about than just the developer fee report. I mean, it doesn't say, there's no flavor of what they were. I know it's not detailed, but it doesn't say what, in fact, Carrie McDonald was talking about, and Gretchen was actually not talking about the report. She was talking about a developer. She's been, excuse me? I'm talking right now, and you're talking too. It doesn't say anything about Gretchen. She was talking about the report, she was not talking about the report, but that we shouldn't be collecting money. So that wasn't correct. So I would like those changes made.
Are there any other suggestions for changes to the minutes? Ms. Held, do you have enough information to make those changes? Okay, thank you. So we have a motion and a second to approve the minutes as amended. Will you call the roll, please?
Call the vote.
Beg pardon?
Call the vote, not the roll.
I'm sorry, we
Same
request the
thing.
vote, please.
Member Friend?
Aye.
Member Wright?
Aye.
Member Brownell? Aye. Member Wilson?
Aye.
President Tru?
Aye. The next item on the agenda is our general public comment session. During this period of time, anyone who is present is welcome to comment on matters of district interest. In general, this section of the agenda is for individuals who want to address things that are not on the agenda. But if you want to address items that are on the agenda at this time, you may do so, or you can address those items when that item on the agenda comes up.
I don't have any cards.
I'm sorry.
I don't have any requests.
Oh, so we have no requests. Is there? But we're generous. Is there anyone who would like to make a general comment? Good. Thank you, Jeff.
Good evening, everybody. I just want to say how happy
Who are
I
you
am.
first?
What's that?
Who are you?
Jeff L.
Okay.
I just want to say how happy I am that Coast Union unanimously approved the MOU, and that's exciting for Scott, the board, for all of us. So that's great that we get to move forward now and focus on our school, our K through 8, and we'll still be looking towards high school things, but I'm so happy that we'll be able to spend much more time on K through 8. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Next item on the agenda is approval or denial of inter-district transfers, and the first IDT is number 28-2017. Superintendent Smith, if you would please.
Thank you, President Troop. This is a student who moved to Morro Bay and would like to finish the school year, so I recommend approve.
Is there any discussion?
We have a motion.
Is there a motion to approve?
I make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve. Ms. Held, would you record the vote, please?
Member Wright?
Aye.
Member Brownell? Aye. Member Wilson?
Aye.
President Tru?
Aye.
Member Friend?
Aye.
I just noticed on one of these stock that there's something, the SSID number is different from the social security number, is that correct?
SSID number would be a state student ID number.
Okay. That's good. I don't know why they named it so similarly to the standard social security number. Okay, next item on the agenda is IDT 4-2018, Superintendent Smith.
This is another student recently moved to Morro Bay, would like to finish the school year, so I recommend approve on this one too.
I move that we approve.
I'll second it.
So we have a motion and a second to approve IDT 4-2018. Is there any discussion? Ms. Held, if you would record the vote, please.
I'm sorry, who made the motion?
I did.
Ron did, and Susan seconded.
Member Brownell? Aye. Member Wilson?
Aye.
President Tru?
Aye.
Member Friend?
Aye.
Member Wright?
Aye.
Okay, next item on the agenda is IDT 5-2018, Superintendent Smith.
This is a release, and so I'm recommending approve.
Is there a motion to approve?
motion to approve.
I'll second.
So we have Member Brownell moved and Member Wright seconded. Is there any discussion? Would you record the vote, please?
Member Wilson?
Aye.
President Tru?
Aye.
Member Friend?
Aye.
Member Wright?
Aye.
Member Brownell? Aye.
Next item on the agenda is the ASB report. I don't see any students here.
The director's
They're
here.
leaders.
Leaders.
Okay, hi, leader.
Hi. Right now, we're working on our spring dance, which is in April after we come back from break. We've also solidified our spirit days. Today was Love and Kindness Day. A lot of the students dressed up. Besides just there was spirit wear, and there were a lot of nice little notes and gifts going around campus. We have Wear Green and Leprechaun Day next month coming up. And we have Freaky Friday, which we're really excited about. I think that was suggested by a staff member, where students, if you don't know the movie or the book, it's pretty funny. Students and adults will switch dress code sort of for the day. So I'm interested to see how that works out. And then May is Twin Day, but we haven't set a date for it. I know, if you haven't seen the movie or read the book, it's pretty hilarious, but children and adults switch places for that day. And just a plug for drama, The Lion King opens next week. It also closes next week. But it's Thursday, Friday, and Saturday at 7 o'clock, and the kids are amazing, and they work really, really hard. So I hope you all can come, and remember, staff and board members and teachers are all free, but your dates must be paid for.
I was at the senior center recently, and somehow the school came up, and they made the gal that was working made a comment that it would be helpful if they knew, because a lot of the seniors don't want to go out of town for performances.
Right.
So if they knew ahead of time and they could put it in their newsletter,
Oh, that would be great.
they'd be happy. And I have then I forgot about it, and then I went back, and so I got a newsletter, and I have the number of the contact person if I can give that to you.
Yeah, that would
Because
be
they
great.
said if they could get people to come, I mean, it'd be a win-win. We'd get more people here.
Absolutely.
People in the community would see it, and they would,
No, I'm
Yeah.
happy to include them into I do the KSBY community calendar, and we do
Oh, cool.
posters around town, and
All right, I'll send that to you.
To the usual suspects, but yeah, I would appreciate that, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else have questions or comments?
Thank you,
I'm
Ms.
sorry.
Stone.
When can I drop off that erosion cloth?
Whenever it's convenient for
Do you
you.
need it for jungle, or you're past that?
Well, no, we're far too late for that. If it's okay with Mrs. Held, if it could be in the office, then I can have Martin, take it to the bus barn for me, that would be good.
Well, shoot, drop it off at the bus barn. You're even closer.
Well, if, whenever it's convenient for you.
Yeah,
Yeah, they weigh like 6,000 pounds, so
Yeah,
if it's a full roll.
well, it's a roll, but it's pretty light. I'll bag it up to you because it's so little shed.
Okay, thank you so much.
Sure.
The next item on the agenda is the Health and Safety Committee report.
PTA.
I'm sorry, I skipped the PTA. I did that last
So,
month too. Next item on the agenda is the PTA report.
I attended the PTA meeting yesterday. It was a good meeting. They are setting up for the Spirit Sprint. They've engaged a company to help promote it and get the kids excited, and also handle the fundraising end. So it's kind of going to be a little bit of a new experiment, a new chapter with the Spirit Sprint and how they're doing it this year. But
When is it again?
Sounds pretty exciting. The dates for the Spirit Sprint, I don't have off the top of my head, I'm sorry. It's, those, could you look that up? And then the other things is the PTA agreed to, pay for 3 plaques for the district offices of the 3 districts that agreed on the MOU, a little commemorative plaque celebrating the partnership between the 3 districts. And so that's in process, and also PTA is gonna pay for some gift baskets that we're gonna put together for the 3 boards of trustees as a thank you for their work on it. And we were thinking that they would include some brown butter cookies in it, and various other items.
Somebody asked for those at the
That's
Coast
right.
Board meeting, as I recall.
Perhaps we can get them donated.
I told Victoria Schumacher, I said, when it's phased in, I'll bring you some. So she's got 3 years to go. Or I'll make some, I've got the recipe.
The Spirit Sprint is April 19th. Unless it rains, it'll be the 20th. And that's it for PTA. They are also, although they are looking for a new president for next year. So, trying to look around for that.
Thank you. Okay, now, report from the Health and Safety Committee.
Oh, can you hear me? So health and safety, the county-wide, party basically, and it, to basically commemorate all the things that are great going on during the year. So the whole county gets together with their safety committees, the superintendents, principals, the committees, and get together and then we talk about how well everybody's done, what kind of spending's been going on, and really celebrate, how well we're doing with getting out information to help our employees be safer at work. So we always pick a school district of the year. Last year we were fortunate enough to be that winner, so we probably won't get it this year, but you never know. 2 years in a row, I don't know. But they always do that, so it's a really nice event down in Pismo Beach, and so it comes with a little lunch, and there's always a really nice speaker, sometimes a comedian comes. But it's nice to hear about what's going on around the county, what people are doing to help employees to be safe, so it's kind of fun to get everybody together. And I think Scott is gonna go this time, because I don't know if you've ever been.
Nope.
You get to go this time, so that'll be fun. And we're working on some things around campus. The guys, the MOT guys, have requested a trailer to help them move things around so they can get it on the trailer, move it from around campus areas. It's stuff that's really heavy, and so it's really low, so they can, it's an elevated, I guess, trailer that moves up and down so they can move things on the trailer. So that we're looking into that and looking at the prices and seeing what we can do there. We continue to do our incentive programs where we have monthly little quizzes that we have. What is this month's
Valley Fever.
topic? Valley Fever, that's right, because that's I think more so maybe over the hill, not so much maybe on this side, but it's airborne through the dust from the valley, and it can be pretty serious. So that is our topic this week. But we have stuff, slips, trips, and falls, which are the main accidents that happen at schools. So putting your wires away, for instance, this might not be such a good setup right here. If they walked in, he would be really mad. But
Yeah, me too, over here.
but we continue just to keep everybody kind of up to date and educated about being safe and being aware of your surroundings, really what it's all about, and trying to do the right things. Nessa's doing a great job of keeping us up to date and keeping us moving in the right direction and really keeping us going, so it's nice. That's it.
Thank you. Any questions? Next item on the agenda is board member reports. Does any board member want to make a report?
Sure. Last month, you guys agreed that, or voted to approve my going to CSBA's Legislative Action Day. Just for some personal reasons, I can't go. So I've already told Melanie that, so I'm not going up to that. I think in the future, we might need to discuss how those professional development request forms work, because I know I always try to research and find my own hotels, but then Melanie had already found one for me, and she got one for a night that I wasn't going to be there. I was going to go the following night because my parents live up there, so she found the hotel for me. Luckily, we were able to cancel it, but I think somehow that needs to be streamlined. I didn't want her to get a hotel for me yet because I didn't have the exact date, so that's not streamlined on there. And so, and I typically don't go to those hotels anyways because where the conference is, because they're more expensive.
May I make a comment? I'm pretty sure that our AR for travel says that the business office will make the reservations. So if you want an exception to that,
Put that on the report?
then I think you need to talk to Scott and Melanie and get an exception, but that's the way.
Well, okay, then maybe a future
AR said.
agenda item, I would like to change that. But anyway, so that's not part of the report, so. I came to the CCAC meeting here because I'm on it, and again, there was cars parked right by the trash can, and I'm able-bodied, I can move around, but I've made this comment before, if we're having community groups here, those cars shouldn't be parked there, because I had to go onto the grass around, so if anybody was, not so stable, I still think if people are coming to our campus on whatever nights, there should not be cars blocking the walkway. So I don't know how to handle that. This is like the third or the fourth time I brought it up.
The blocking right here?
Yeah, so when you walk, you have to go onto the grass to get into the gym. So if they were staggered, they can still park there, but stagger each other or somehow park where you can still walk by would be acceptable.
So if they had some kind of designation that would,
How about putting
Know where to
handicap
park?
there? That would cut out the people.
Well, it doesn't need to be handy, it just, as long as they're moved over on those nights. I mean, I
yeah,
understand.
I'm just saying, you know, if there's no one there to direct people,
Well, I think it's the custodians, if they were directed to move over, or somehow, the walkway just needs to be clear. However that gets worked out, I would like to see on a consistent basis, because it's not happening.
Well, on events like that, when staff isn't necessarily here, and I have already spoken with the custodians and they agreed to park right next to the fence only. But maybe we could do some painting on the concrete that would help.
That's what I was thinking.
So I'll look into that with Ismail.
Is there any possibility of partially opening the gates here so that someone could walk through the gates but not drive through? That may just push the problem of the driveway.
Well, they are driving back here.
I said, is there a way to close these
Yeah, he
gates
was just saying.
so that someone can walk through but not drive
Okay,
through?
I just didn't understand, okay? I
Okay.
misunderstood you. Just
All right.
chillax.
We could look into that too.
Other board members?
For those of you who don't get the trib, I thought this was above the fold. My wife being a ex-reporter, this is the prime position for these things, so that was pretty nice. And I made a PDF because it's hard to send the file along, so if anybody wants to spread that to other people who might not get the trib, I'd be happy to supply that. And I wanted to say about the meeting, most of us were there, but I really have to say that Terry and Scott, I thought you were both very diplomatic in your assessment and reaching out to the Coast Board. And the last thing would be is, I really have to say that this was the culmination of so much, and I don't believe it would have happened without Scott. It's been attempted for so many years, and you've been very generous, you know, with sharing the success with the other boards and the administrations. But they've been involved for a long time, and you were the new element that I think found a way to find a sweet spot for everybody. It's something that should be celebrated. So,
Thank you.
put all that on the record verbatim.
I'd like to comment on the same thing. Paper made mention of, this has been decades in the process. And I mentioned in a couple of meetings ago that I have friends that have had to deal with getting their student to a school of their choice and being told they can't and being pulled out of the school. Scott, I am really impressed that you were able to work with the other superintendents to a point where it became an agreeable situation rather than antagonistic. I don't know what you have as far as your ability to get people to agree, but whatever it is, keep it going. I'm just so pleased to be on the board at a time that this has happened. You know, having gone through some of the meetings earlier where there was so much contention, and then to find out that all it took was a little bit of give and take between three superintendents, and then going back to their boards and explaining what can be done, and then boards agreeing. I feel really good about that. For the first time now, I feel like we're really moving forward for students.
I went to as well, and I don't have the baggage. Scratch that. I don't have the history. So the celebratory part of it doesn't carry as much weight. However, I do feel the weight of what you did accomplish in terms of navigating just different visions, different agendas, different needs, whatever. And I can appreciate that for sure. And I just both really appreciated both of you and the way you articulated to the Coast Board. And Terry, I really was on the edge of my seat with what you were saying. It was beautiful what you wrote to them and said to them. So anyway, I'm too
Thank you.
pleased to be a part of it all, even not as invested as a lot of other people. But it's an honor to be here and be part of it all.
I want to follow up on Ron's comment specifically. Thank Scott for everything that he did that made that happen, because I don't think it would have happened without him. I also, you know, when you mentioned that we were talking before they had voted, so it was appropriate to say nice things. I just wanted to comment too on Samuel Shalhoub's presence and his demeanor in conducting that meeting, because I think that's different from some of the ways the Coast Board would have behaved.
You can say
in the
all.
past. Beg pardon?
You can say all of the ways.
Well, but I thought he distinguished himself. And I was also pretty amazed at the vote and the letter of support for Superintendent Schumacher that they had passed. There are obviously some pretty contentious things going on there. This was only one of them. And it was good to see that happen. I want to make, I'll make the other comment when we get to high school options. I'll make it now. I think the other thing that helped a lot was that if you talk about all of the activities in 2017, everything that was sponsored by this board was open and collaborative, inclusive. We invited everyone in Cayucas. We frequently had people from Coast who were here, sometimes just to listen, but sometimes to participate. And I think that was very helpful too. So thank you all for your support of the whole effort.
I have one more thing to add, Hannah, if that's okay, on my paragraph. I just took notice of the amount of parents that weren't there. Considering after the very first meeting, after Val and I took office, our room here was filled.
You mean from here?
From here. And so I took notice of how few of them were at the Coast Board meeting. That's all.
Okay. Anything else from board members? The next thing on the agenda is the superintendent's report.
So, my report's up on the front there. The 5th grade trip to Rancho El Chorro went well. There's a little bit of a scheduling issue always, because when their program ends and the bus getting back here on time to haul our students, but other than minor inconveniences, it went great and the students had a good time. Students are really excited about Lion King, and Victoria Doust is here and has been continuing to do an excellent job, not only putting on the productions, but inspiring kids to grow up a little every day. And so we appreciate the work that she continues to do. We also had a facilities committee meeting, and it was very pleasant. We have some draft ideas, and those ideas are on the report there, and looking at refining possibly these ideas, and just want to make sure that the board's fully aware and the public that these are the ideas floating around right now, that there's parent concern about the fact that when we close down the campus, we can't really even close it down. And so security fencing and securing this campus a little better is a parent concern that's been brought forward by multiple parents, including the both parents who are participating on the committee. So that's something that we want to work on a plan for and bring back. Shouldn't be too big of a deal, but if we look at it big picture wise, where do we want to eventually get, and then what can we do in incremental steps to get there, and just do step one now, should be very affordable. But bottom line is, one of the things that I think is critical to looking at securing the campus is, what do we want our district standard to be for fencing? Right now, it's the 2-inch black fencing. I believe they call it fabric fencing, even though it's not made of fabric. And most spots are 6 foot. My recommendation to the committee, but it's still up for debate, is going to be that our new district standard, whenever we put in new fencing, would be instead of the 2-inch, use 1-inch, because 1-inch isn't climbable. You can't put your toe in it and climb up it. Like 2-inch, you can just climb right up and over. And so going, the 1-inch is more expensive because it's twice as much metal going into the fencing almost. So a 10th or a 1-inch, and going, my recommendation I think is 10 foot, but that's kind of imposing looking for some people, and so possibly 8 foot, but not doing 6 foot anymore. So one of the discussions that'll happen there, and we'll come back with the recommendation, is what should the new district standard be for whenever we replace fencing around here. And then where should our first project be? And obviously one of the big concerns is right over here in the front. We walked around the facility and looked at it, and so we'll be working on something for that. The other thing is the possibility of one additional classroom, and whether that is standard classroom or makerspace, I think is still open to discussion and will be worked on. So that would be phase 1, utilizing current funds.
So current funds out of what fund?
We have the capital facilities fund and developer fee funds. And
How is
then
security fencing a developer fee?
that probably wouldn't be.
What about makerspace? I mean, that's,
Additional classroom, whether it's makerspace or standard classroom, I think can definitely be developer fees. And there's multiple reasons for needing that. We've got on the end of this building, one of our math teachers teaching in what's essentially a half-size classroom. So how all that works out, I don't know yet, but those are preliminary ideas. And then, preliminary ideas for phase 2 would be, as a result of whatever's decided in phase 1, then looking at what our options are to expand office space, and possibly a bus barn fencing project. We really are kind of impacted on office space. I've got, our psychologist has a space in the back of the ballroom where he does his testing to qualify kids for special education.
What's the ballroom?
It's a small room between 2nd and 3rd grade over in that building. It works for him, but it's not optimal. And we've got our counselor in another little tiny office behind 5th grade right now. And so with all the services that we're providing for students, office space is definitely an issue. And then for phase 3, we thought something that would be fantastic, and this is just total preliminary ideas, but if we were to move music out of this room into their own music room, so this room could be utilized for a lot of other things, then we would need a new music room. We'd also need music storage, and if we're doing some sort of a big project like that, one of my ideas was the possibility of combining it with a music venue, and so the possibility of pushing the ball field out maybe 20 feet, and then right along the hill, the bottom of the hill, building a music room with music storage and maybe some seating built into the hillside or something like that, where they had an outdoor stage right there kind of connected to their music room. I don't know. Or it could just be a music room and storage. I think that would be the minimum, but so we're looking at possibilities, but that's obviously pretty far down the road, so we've got plenty of time to work that out, what we want. But those are some of the ideas that came out of the meeting, and just want to make sure that everyone's staying informed as we think about it and come up with possible plans. And so I would expect that most likely there will be new information coming forward at every board meeting in the future to keep you guys abreast of what's happening. And then, what?
Why the bus barn fencing?
Just was one of the items brought up that we thought the district might want to look at, but it wasn't looked at as the top priority. The top priority was security and
No, I understand that, but I mean, I
bus
just
space.
I don't see why I'm just curious what the reasons would be for that.
Well, two things. One is on the far side of the bus barn, as you're driving up on the left, there's about 10 additional feet to that next driveway that is our property but not fenced in. And so we could enlarge the yard on that side. And then there's room on the other side too to enlarge the yard. And so new fencing and maybe some nice road base in there would make it all weather and increase our space and allow for more storage. But again, they're just all draft ideas.
If you had a music room and a venue, could you utilize, you said this space for other things, could you use this for office space? Or what other things could you utilize this room for?
Oh, in here?
Yeah.
Well, it could be used for like staff meetings, staff training. It could be used for community events. It could be set up better so that when we have board meetings in here, it works a little better and we don't have all the music storage. Just multiple things. Would I recommend splitting up the space and creating office space in here? No. I think it's, I think there's a reason that everyone refers to it as the historical auditorium. It's something that the school would want to keep intact, as the historical auditorium. But I think it's, while on one hand, it's our music teacher, Mr. Lee, makes good use of the space, and the music program here is great. It's also can be kind of difficult, especially when they're first learning a new song or whatever. What do I even know the word I want? A new musical piece. It can be pretty rough in meetings next door here while they're all trying to figure it out on day one. Towards the end of the musical piece, when they're mastering it, it's not as bad, but you know, ultimately, I think it would be best to have music have its own space. But you know, that would be the lowest priority, and we're talking pretty far out in the future. But if we want to, you know, do anything to kind of finish off this campus, I think that might be one of the things that we want to look at. And so then, moving on to number 4.
Can I make a comment?
Go ahead.
Carrie had some questions. One of the things was at the facilities meeting, Scott gave us a tour, and I actually was unaware. Scott says they're using like the ballroom and stuff. There are instructors and counselors working in what are essentially closets and storerooms, and you know, it's maximizing our space, but you know, it's not what we should be providing, and you know, having to leave the door open when you have a confidential thing going on because there's no window in the room, we should be able to do better. And on the other thing, and the security fencing, obviously, again, we have an event that, you know, you're not sure if it would have stopped it, but we should be doing everything we can in that regard too. And then on the bus barn, it seems to be a confusion. There's all the property there is not fenced, and all the time we have people using our property for parking. There was a heavy loader that was parked there for weeks on our property, and we have liability for those things. And if somebody was wanting to park any other place on the campus, we would be charging them and having them sign a release for it, you know. So, and this has been going on for a long time, and it's like, you know, let's use our property and protect our property. That's a reason to look at that. It should be there. So anyway, you should all take that tour though and look at those alternative teaching spaces.
We're trying to use the facility as much as possible, that's for sure. So, working on next year's budget. Have some notes in here. I know that the board has discussed, concerns about the ending fund balance and reserves in the multi-year projection. And so I kind of set a goal for myself to identify and cut at least $100,000 from next year's budget that won't significantly impact any student programs. And because of several items that have occurred, that looks like it's going to be pretty easy to do. And I also have news on top of what's in here that I got after this was published last Friday. So because of special ed students come and go, our expenses next year will decrease in special education by $50,000. I would expect salaries also to decrease by about $50,000 next year because we have some shifting staff, and that's not us putting anyone out of a job. That is all voluntary stuff that's happening with staff members, and so it'll be good for the employees and good for the district. I expect to save about $50,000 there. Now that I anticipate that we won't be spending as much on high school options, I expect to reduce the legal budget by about $30,000. This $10,000 that I put in here for electricity due to our solar and lighting, actually the estimate that I dug out of some of the documentation yesterday is $13,000, so it's even actually more than that. I knew it would be at least 10, but looks like that's gonna be 13. And then also what appeared in this year's budget was all of the expenses for the solar and lighting project, and that's at $211,000, but that's a one-time expense. The rest of these are ongoing annual expenses. And then also on the board agenda tonight is a resolution asking to grant me the authority to request Title IV funding of $10,000 for next year, which would be designated for student services. And then because of the MOU, under our current enrollment, I would expect approximately $8,000 increase in revenues for inter-district students. On top of that, I also, since I published the superintendent's report, was able to meet at the county with Rebecca Lorenzi, and we dug into the second interim that will be coming soon and looked at what budgets are not being spent that are currently in our budget. And so there was an MOT sub that I had put in our budget this year that we are not using, so that $15,000 will be pulled out because we had a special ed student move out of the district. There was $50,000 in there for them that we're pulling out.
In addition to the $50,000 that's already in the report?
That's for next year. And so yes, that was appearing in the multi-year, but it also appears this year, and we're gonna pull it out before second interim, so it'll be gone at second interim, which will change our multi-year projection in the second interim. And then in addition to that, $10,000 for the special ed aid that was assigned to that student. So there's gonna be $75,000 pulled out of the second interim budget report for this fiscal year. When you look at the multi-year projection, which was the main concern, in year two, that translates into $150,000 on the ending fund balance. And in year three, that translates into $225,000 in the ending fund balance. So it will really change what's going on with the multi-year projection. And then there's other monies that we haven't spent yet, but we're not comfortable pulling out until the end of the year. And that includes an additional $10,000 in occupational therapy expenses, special ed transportation of $10,000, and legal fees that I don't think we will spend this year of $25,000. So that will be an additional $45,000. So between the two, we're looking at $120,000 in this year's budget that looks like won't be spent. And when you look at the multi-year projection again in year 2, that 120 turns into 240 and then 360 in the third year. So that's $360,000 by the end of the year that our multi-year projection and the ending fund balance won't be impacted by. So those are significant changes in our size of a budget. That will really, between those and the expected cuts for next year, I expect that we're gonna absolutely, completely fix the issue regarding multi-year projection. And I'd be happy to field any questions, but that's my superintendent's report.
Well, I have a question on the attachment to your superintendent's report. You have a high school options expense report, and I don't believe some of these things belong on here. The Public Records Act. The Public Records Act on here from AALLR and the Erickson Law Firm and the Brown Act had to deal with a public records request, specifically dealt with individuals believing that we're not following board policy, had to do with high school options information, but the request itself, it's not a high school options thing, it's we're not following policy. And the Brown Act, again, that went back to the CCAC meeting, so I believe it's a misnomer, I don't know, I just don't agree that those things should be on the high school options expense report.
So the president and I discussed the expense reports. I told him that I would come up with any associated costs. All of the things on this report happened because we were in the process of discussing high school options. None of these expenses would have occurred if we hadn't been in that process. Some are related items. And then I believe, Terry, am I correct, that I sent you a draft of this? And so it was just trying to provide all the information. If an individual person thinks that the California Public Records requests at almost $7,000 aren't a high school options issue, then yeah, okay.
Well, that
I think
public
it's a matter
records
of
request
opinion.
was requested because the board policy on requesting agenda items wasn't followed. Now, it had to do with the agenda that had high school options on it, but the public records request was asking for agenda requests for 2 items that appeared on the agenda that didn't have the proper requests. Again, it had to do with high school options, but the request itself is because policy.
Actually, none of that money is on here.
Okay, so which public records request?
Because I didn't spend money on that one. I handled that one in-house. This is all about the public records requests, almost $7,000, asking for the email that Trustee Wilson sent out.
Okay, which again was not following policy about how to store those emails. Again, it's policy, it's not the public records,
I'm sorry.
Do you have
well,
more to
the
say?
public records request was because we're not following the policy on emails. That's what it was, well, I can pull it up if you like, but.
I'll make this observation. My perception of what happened with some of these things is that there were members of the public or members of the board who were upset that someone had made some assertions that weren't favorable to the legislative initiative. And rather than refuting the assertions that were made and the assertions that were made, Mr. Wilson's letter was made public. The assertions that were made, I think, were to discredit him. They were specifically related to high school options. Same thing with the Brown Act. It was, the assertions that were made was an attempt to suppress discussion, appropriate discussion about high school options. And these are specific things that, had we not been doing high school options, we wouldn't have spent the money. So,
No, I disagree with
anybody
you.
else have a
but
comment? I'll make one more observation about this, that the largest amount here at the top is the East Shore Consulting Report. That was something that we commissioned at the request of a citizens group sometime in 2016, probably
February.
summer or fall of 2016. It took forever to get a report from them. We had to coerce them into making a report in January of this year, when the report was due in September, January of last year, when the report was due in September of 2016. And in my humble opinion, that report was close to valueless. So that was not money that we spent well. I'm not sure exactly what we could have done to improve that, but it's certainly money that we spent at the request of a citizens group to make sure that we were thoroughly examining all the options that were available to us. Any further comment or question? Okay, next thing on the agenda is the LCAP update.
We had a parent meeting, or we had some parents come in. It was a good meeting. We talked about different activities we could possibly incorporate into our school year. We've got a couple of things already scheduled, but just to increase communication with our community, with the school, and with the parents. And so there were some really good ideas that came out of that. We do have a science night coming up in May. That's a family science night for about 2 hours.
Oh, what's
It's
that?
good, May 4th. We're going to, work on getting some other, we're working on with some older community members, working on a creative writing evening, and with Eric Schofield, our art teacher, to incorporate writing, whether it's poems or short stories, incorporate it with art, or with the computer workings there, so they can write stories and even just display it in circular motions or in a shape, and just have fun with some literature. We had a couple of senior members in the community come to an LCAP meeting several times ago. Wanted to see like a language arts day, the entire day. So I said, well, how about if we change that to maybe an evening that we can all get together. So took a couple of them to dinner last week, I guess it was, and kind of picked their brains some more and making sure that they're on board to come help us with that. So it's kind of fun to get some of the community members to come in and help some more again. So it's really fun. I know that Scott went to there was a big meeting at Rancho El Chorro's meeting grounds at the county. There were a lot of people there, I think, but the meetings are going well. So we do have a healthy kids survey that's coming out for our 7th graders next week, the following week. And then the parents will also get a school-wide survey to go out and see what the climate is. They'll ask about climate, what they feel like is needed or is not going on, and what we're doing really well, what we might want to work on. So it'll be nice to get that information, see how we're doing. Scott wanted to talk about the meeting or not, but.
Just that those 3 surveys, it was the Healthy Kids Survey, which we're required to do by the state, through WestEd. And then we are purchasing the 2 add-on surveys, the parent survey and the student school climate survey. And so I think those surveys will provide us some good input.
How much do they cost?
Going forward.
Just out of curiosity.
They weren't very much money, 300 and 500 or something like that. And then the LCAP meeting that I attended, it was an all-day training, with Janelle Kubiak from WestEd. She's one of the premier people who works with the CDE on all
Excuse
things.
me, Scott. Victoria, could you close the door when you leave? It's cold. I'm sorry, Scott.
On all things LCAP, and so I was there for that. All the districts in the county were well represented, even districts from outside the county. Pretty big training. And I think that's it for LCAP.
Any questions? Okay, the next thing on the agenda is the high school options discussion. And Member Friend, you had a request for discussion during the high school options. Could you introduce that, please?
Well, I was just curious, once we had a resolution, what Ochoa and Moore is doing to pursue each priority and what we're doing. I mean, this was submitted before the MOU was signed, so with all that money that we spent with Ochoa and Moore, what are we still pursuing either of those 2 other options, or just basically I just like an update of what's happening?
So, yeah, on my previous report, it was 13,000 and change we've spent with Ochoa and Moore, which for the amount of service they provided us, I think was a real bargain. Kind of amazing that we got as much service from them for that price. Mainly because Tom is retired and enjoys doing this and doesn't charge us for all of his time. And so, since the high school MOU was imminent and no K-12 petition had been brought forward by stakeholders, we were waiting to see if one, the high school MOU would be possible, and 2, if this board would feel differently because of the change of circumstances on the ground. So there wasn't really a lot to do for K-12 unification because there was no petition. The next step would have been to look at a petition and possibly support a petition if a petition came forward. As far as the legislative option, I was in contact with, if I can get this right, I believe Hunter's the San Luis Obispo office for Senator Monning's office, and Trevor up in Sacramento. Talked to Hunter a couple times. Ochoa and Moore asked me, did I want them to inquire with Senator Monning's office to see whether or not he was going to be sponsoring the legislation. And because I was getting updates from Hunter at the San Luis Obispo office, I didn't feel like I needed to pay them to inquire because Hunter was updating me directly. And what he was telling me was that they were still researching it. And so that's all the information that was there. So I didn't see any need to spend money with Ochoa and Moore at that point. And then ended up getting a phone call from Hunter yesterday from Sacramento And he told me that, Senator Monning has decided not to sponsor the legislation. And so that's where we're at with that. I didn't see any reason to have Ocho and Moore do anything, at that point and pay them more money for information that I was already getting.
Are there further questions? So I think following up on Scott's comments, my suggestion would be that we have, schedule an agenda item either for the March or for the April meeting, where we go back and we review the current status of high school options and decide with input from the community what we want to do. We may want to propose a new resolution that supersedes the existing one. Obviously, we don't need a memorandum that encourages us to follow up on the MOU anymore. But then we can reset ourselves. As we all know, there's still $1 million that's going to coast every year, even after the MOU is fully implemented. So I'm not sure we're done with this, but I think it depends on community input and on the feeling of the board about what we decide to do next.
That would be brought up at the next board meeting, or?
Well, we could decide whether we want to do it at the March board meeting or the April board meeting. I don't think it's a pressing item right now, but I think it's important enough so that we shouldn't forget about it either. Jeff hopes we'll forget about it, but not quite yet.
Jerry?
Mr. Wilson?
In what Scott was able to achieve too, one of my concerns, and we somehow worked it out, is that there's no poison pill in there. The MOU seems to be bulletproof in that it would take that everyone would have to agree, and that the chances of somebody dropping out because of revenue limit with the 25% more, it had no sense, at no time would it ever make sense. You're getting more money for having the students than you gain in services by not having it. So that was a really good thing. And the fact that there was no clause in there that the board couldn't support legislation or a K-12 at some time in the future, leaves options for the community that if one of those things did move forward, that's the way they're supposed to work. There's, the community generates them because it's a community interest, and then, the process would take place just as it would. There was no interference. So that, again, there were details in there that were well thought out, so. Okay.
I have a comment on that. I only agree with that as long as there's some time constraints, because, thank you, Mr. Held, for your comments, because he's not the only one that I've heard that from, like, yay, we get to move on. So the sentiment I'm hearing from the community people that I'm in contact with is, yay, we get to move on. So, yes, keep this around at a minimal at best, unless we get a room full of people again. But it is a time drain on Superintendent Smith's time in our K through 8, and a financial drain. And this is only representative from 2016. Not having,
2018.
Well, there were previous.
what
last
about
years.
going back for the 20 years this has been going on and how many legal fees?
Yeah.
Which
Right.
nobody's asking, but I'd love to know that number, so we can all get real perspective on how much has gone into this. So, let's relish in our MOU and let the community speak, and anyway, I know Mr. Held's not the only one, so. But celebrating to move on.
Okay, other comments? Any comments from the public?
Yeah, may I address the board? I'm sorry.
Please, please.
I got here just a little late. Hi, my name is Zeke Delamas. As you guys know, I've been in front of this board many times before. First off, happy Valentine's Day. Thank you for your service and all you do. I felt compelled to come down tonight to just say thank you. It's been a long, challenging road to get where we're at. We've been through, you're our third superintendent. I believe we started with George when we first started, and on this, I know it's been generations.
Four.
Yeah, that's what I mean. You're our fourth, and it's been we just sitting down with my wife Rocky, and she shared my sentiments as well. But we were talking about how long it had been, and it's been a tremendous amount of time, and it's been a roller coaster. I've always been an advocate for the mitigated settlement. I thought that was a solution that was viable, and it sets a precedent, right? And to me, that was really important, that we now have acknowledgement from Coast that they should fund our children wherever we go. It also represents an opportunity to honor our tradition with Coast, which we repeatedly have heard from that community. So I thought I needed to come down and just tell you guys from the bottom of my heart, we're genuinely thankful and appreciate all of the energy that it's taken. As I said, we were to the point where we were about ready to leave Cayucas if we had to, right? I take care of my elderly neighbors on either side, and we would have left. We would have moved to Morro Bay because we didn't want to play that game. And so addressing our concerns and spending the resources and having these meetings means a lot to us. And I don't know that as parents who were advocating for this, you guys heard from us enough that we really appreciate that. I don't know that this solution makes everybody whole. I had to kind of check out of the last little while. My wife kind of filled in my absence, but so I don't know how everybody else in the community feels. Honestly, I don't. But to me personally and from my family, I just wanted to send you guys home with that thank you. Appreciate everything that you guys have done.
Thanks, Zeke.
Thank you. Any other comments from the board, from public? Yes.
I just saw the high school options as a distraction. I saw it as desperation. And with the MOU now, I think it's a breath of relief from all that. And we can start focusing on students that are here in the school, and wishing our students that leave here from 8th grade good luck. And we've done the best we can for those kids and their families. Now they can just focus on what's important in the school, wherever they go.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, then we will move to the next item on the agenda, and that is the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
I'll second.
We have a motion from Clerk Friend and a second from Member Wilson.
I did.
Is there any discussion?
Consent.
Then if the, Hannah, will you tally the vote, please?
President Drew,
Aye.
Member Friend,
Aye.
Member Wright?
Aye.
Member Brownell? Aye. Member Wilson?
Okay, we are now on item 10. And in fact, item 10.1, approval of board policy and board bylaws, first reading. There are 6 board policies here.
Oh, never mind, sorry.
And it's my understanding that in each case, the changes that we're suggesting are all due to changes in law, and they are the CSBA's recommended changes to update our policies to make them consistent with current law. So I would accept a motion to approve all of these policy changes on the first reading, if someone wishes to make that.
I'll second it.
No, you have to make the motion.
Oh, I make it. I make it.
Nice try, but
It's just ahead of the game.
It's Valentine's Day.
It's
I need
Valentine's
to
Day.
my
That's
card.
right.
It's almost
So-
over.
So just, you're moving that we
Adopt them all.
adopt all the policies on the first reading. Is there a second to that? Member Wilson seconds. Is there any discussion?
I do.
Yes.
On the second one, on professional standards, one of the things says wearing inappropriate attire is something that teachers shouldn't do. That seems overly broad. What is inappropriate attire? I mean, I don't know, it just seems odd to me that it's so,
Did you want me to, often they're written in a broad manner, if you were to try and discipline personnel over, inappropriate attire, and they didn't believe their attire was inappropriate, and push the issue, what was appropriate or inappropriate would end up being adjudicated.
okay, no, that's fine, I mean, that's fine, that's, I get it. And the other, only other comment I had was on the suspension, expulsion for due process, under the authority to expel. It says, a student may possess a firearm if written permission from a certificated school employee and the principal's or designee's concurrence. That, especially in light of today and what's going on. When it says the principal's or designee's concurrence, I'd like to see the principal or the designee also sign that written permission form. Just having a certificated staff member say, oh yeah, and that staff member, oh yeah, I talked to the principal or whoever the designee would be. How else do we know that the principal or designee concurred if it's not on that written thing? I would rather have double assurance if there's gonna be a student with a firearm on campus, rather than just it's saying there's a concurrence. I would like at least 2 signatures on that, because I think a firearm on campus with a student is not a good thing.
Yeah, these are generic policies.
I know, but I'd like to
In a
change it.
practical manner, we have no reason to ever approve that. In certain rural high school situations, they may have a team that participates in competition shooting. Those things can occur, but we're not approving that here either way.
Well, no, I understand that, but I would still like the policy to say that it needs more than 1 signature to have a firearm on campus. Whether it's unlikely, I would still like our policy to reflect it's not just 1 adult signature on there.
So do you have a specific amendment to that policy that you'd like to recommend?
I would just say written permission from a certificated school employee and the principal or designee, cross off concurrence.
So replace with and, the word with the word and. So,
Are you with this, Hannah? You know where
No.
she's talking
I don't know
about?
which page you're on.
Let me get
it's
this.
attachment 10.1.4.
A, B, I think there's, it goes all the way
B.
to S.
It's B at the bottom, under authority to expel. Possessing a right there on number 1. Very bottom. Possessing a firearm which is not an imitation firearm is verified by a certificated employee unless the student had obtained written permission to possess the item from a certificated school employee and the principal or designee. I would just get rid of the word concurrence. I want to.
Well, I think I'm sorry, I'm trying to get there still in my computer, but you're on page 4.
It's page B, it's 10.1.4 attachment, but it's page B of this board policy.
At the bottom of the page, number 1. So,
It's page B,
yeah, I'm on page.
it's attachment 10.1.4 on the
Got
bottom.
that page, and it's at the bottom of the page under authority to expel.
Yes,
Right.
Number 1.
Correct.
So, yeah, you're gonna have it in writing from the certificated employee with the principal's signature on it, so.
it doesn't say that. It says, well, what does concurrence mean?
If it's in writing, they're both putting it in writing.
But I guess I'm interpreting that this doesn't have to have the principal signing it.
I wouldn't recommend modifying expulsion, policies that come directly out of Ed Code. I think that's,
I'm confused too, because if it says written permission from a certificated school employee with the principal or designees in concurrence, you have 2 people having written. That's what it says. It says 2.
right, to me, that's both in writing.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. I just interpret it that way. That's fine.
Okay.
Okay, then I'm good with it if that's gonna be 2.
Anything else?
Nope.
Okay. Then, Ms. Held, would you record the vote, please?
Member Friend,
Aye.
Member Wright,
Hi.
Member Brownell. Member Wilson.
Aye.
President Tru.
Aye. Next item on the agenda is review and approve resolution 1802-2, a resolution to establish a special reserve fund for post-employment benefits. Superintendent Smith, if you would.
Thank you, President Tru. During the last fiscal year, in the springtime, we ordered up a actuarial report from Dempsey Filliger, I believe is the name of the audit company. And they did an actuarial to estimate our future expenses on employee retirement benefits. So this would mainly be healthcare benefits, cost of paying for healthcare benefits for retired employees to the age of 65. And in that actuarial report, it recommended that we do a set aside of $69,000.
Is it one time?
No, but you get the actuarial report redone, and I actually need to reach out to them to find out. I need to make some contacts to find out if it's required. I think off the top of my head, I want to remember that it was every 2 years, but I need to confirm that. So right now, we are just doing pay-as-you-go. And so we had Rebecca at the end of the year do a $69,000 set aside, but technically a set aside still is sitting in general fund. Our second option to handle these payments would be to do what I'm recommending tonight, which is establish Fund 20 And the name of Fund 20 is derived directly out of the state accounting codes, called Special Reserve Fund for Post-Employment Benefits. The third option that, and I don't know if you guys remember discussing this, but the third option was that we could put money in an irrevocable trust. The problem with an irrevocable trust is once you put it in there, you can never take it out. This, by board resolution, you can take the money, put the money in or take it out. The nice thing about this option is it provides the board with flexibility going into the future, because I believe that the Dempsey-Filliger actuarial overestimated what our realized costs will be. And so it provides the board flexibility. It also gets it out of the general fund, so it provides the board and the public a clearer picture on what's available in the general fund. And so for those reasons, my recommendation is this is the best option, rather than just leaving it in the general fund and doing pay-as-you-go or doing the irrevocable trust. I think this is the best way to provide clarity to the board, the staff, and the public on what that money's for, and yet still provide flexibility going forward in case we overfund the fund, if I can say fund twice like that. Because reality is their estimate was $69,000, but I know exactly what our costs were this year, and they were $16,000. And so, you know, and I know most likely next year our cost will be $32,000. With this size of staff, it's not that hard for me to figure it out. Yet they run it through their little fancy calculator and come up with $69,000. I argued with the owner of the company on the phone to no avail. But bottom line is, we need to set aside money for it. We need to follow the actuarial, and if the actuarial, the next actuarial realizes that the previous one overfunded, they'll make the correction. But we don't really have a choice except to follow the actuarial report.
Yeah, well, and you're saying that the resolution you're proposing, we wouldn't get in that trap. Yeah.
We'd move the money now. It's to establish, the resolution establishes the fund and authorizes us to move that $69,000 into the fund that was from the actuarial report. And then what will happen is, when we get another actuarial, we'll transfer more funds, but at the end of the year, we will do a fund transfer from that fund back to the general fund to cover the expenses that we paid for during that fiscal year for retiree health benefits.
So
Hopefully I said that clearly.
it gives us the flexibility. We're not making money inaccessible when we actually need it now, when we're talking about balancing our budget.
Right, it gives us flexibility because, I mean, the last thing I want to do is overfund an irrevocable trust, and then we're stuck and the money just sits in there, and then we're expected to continue to fund it at the next actuarial report rate.
Even though there's money sitting in.
Right.
I had one more question here. On since it's in caps, the other post-employment benefits, you talked about a 65-year-old, as described here is that there's other documentation that sets the parameters for that kind of benefit?
Well, the teacher contract provides for retirement benefits up to the age of 65. And so at that point, no more benefits are paid out.
Okay, I just wanted to know what it was connected to.
It's connected to the contract.
Thanks.
So if we're gonna have further discuss, well, I'd like to ask for a motion to approve this, and then we can have further discussion if it's warranted.
I'll make a motion to approve it.
I'll second that.
So Member Brownell moved and Member Wilson seconded. that we approve resolution 1802-2 as presented. Is there any further discussion?
I just have one question.
I'm sorry?
I just have one question.
Okay, that's discussion.
Will this be reflected in the second interim that's coming?
Not 100% sure. I'm not sure that,
Well, that could change some.
probably.
I would hope, because I mean, that's gonna change our multi-year projections that we were talking about earlier significantly.
I would assume that we can get it in there before then.
Okay, any further discussion? Ms. Held, would you record the vote, please?
Member Wright?
Aye.
Member Brownell? Aye. Member Wilson?
Aye.
President Tru?
Aye.
Member Friend?
Aye.
Next item on the agenda is resolution 1802-3, resolution to authorize the superintendent to request Title IV funding.
I'm sorry, would you exercise a little patience with me and allow me to make one final comment on our previous item?
Sure.
Just for clarity's sake, that 69,000 is already in our budget, so it won't translate into any change, I don't believe, in our multi-year projection. The only thing that it would affect is in this fiscal year, it won't be in general fund, it'll be in Fund 20 instead. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but when you look at the reserves, it's not, isn't it?
Well, it's still part of the reserves that you probably don't use, so, I mean, you have access to it, you have access to it if it's not used to apply in the future. You budgeted for $69,000, if you don't spend all of it.
It's gonna be sitting in this fund until a resolution's brought forward to the board to transfer it back, which would be the resolution at the end of the fiscal year to cover
Right,
what we
but in
spent out of the general fund.
But in the calculation of the reserves, it wouldn't be in there if it's in Fund 20, correct?
I believe you are correct. That
Yes,
it
I
would
would-
not be considered as part of the reserves going forward.
Right, so I would like it to be reflected in the second interim, just so it's as complete as we can get it.
So, were you asking for a, staff report on the next item? Is that where we're at?
If we could, because somebody may know what Title IV is, but I don't.
Federal funds, we were notified by the state that we may qualify if we'd like to apply for $10,000 of federal funds for, it would be funding, student services. So, we're in process of applying for the funds, and we are working to make sure, and haven't made any decisions yet on where in the budget would be the most appropriate place to spend those Title IV funds that would free up some general fund money.
I think I just missed it while I was writing. What are the funds applicable to?
They're for, student services, so, we're gonna have to dig into the, state regulations that are based off of federal regulations, the state's interpretation of those regulations, and we haven't made a determination on exactly where it would be best to spend those funds. But wherever we spend them, we're gonna find the appropriate place to spend them, and it'll just relieve $10,000 of unrestricted general fund money. But haven't quite got there yet. Wanna apply for the funds in part of the in the Con-Ed.
Is this considered, I didn't know anything about Title, I didn't know anything about Title IV, so I tried to find something. The only thing I found was about Title IV Part A and it's, it's cool. I mean, the 3 different places that you can broad areas, but is this Title A, or is this what I printed? No.
You know, all I'm doing is, right now, is following up as quick as possible from the notice from the state that we
Okay,
may qualify.
Gotcha. Well, that's nice of them to tell us.
Right,
Okay,
and so you guys are authorizing me to apply for it and see if we get it, and so I'm just chasing a pot of money right now, and
so then we can decide where we want to put it, and if I got it with you.
Okay, is there a motion to approve the resolution?
I'll make a motion that we approve
Member Wilson, is there a second?
I'll second.
Member Wright, been moved and seconded. Is there further discussion? Ms. Held, would you record the vote then, please?
Member Brownell? Aye. Member Wilson?
Aye.
President Tru?
Aye.
Member Friend?
Aye.
Member Wright?
Okay, next item on the agenda is review select 2018 California School Board Association delegate. And we have before us the documentation from CSBA. And we are presented with 3 candidates, and if I recall the process correctly, those candidates had to be approved by their school district as candidates. And I see there's even provision here for a write-in candidate. So I think before we have a motion, I think in this case we really need to have the discussion before we have the motion, because the motion is going to be
Nominating something.
to nominate a person. So I'm going to suggest that there should be some discussion. Anybody who has some ideas on this, please make your idea known. Mr. Wilson.
I know Mark Bachman, who is the incumbent, if I can see that little asterisk there, know his work on the board at San Luis Coastal, and he's thorough and building bridges with San Luis Coastal. Having him in that position couldn't hurt, so that would be my desire.
So I have a comment. I know Mark fairly well, and I think he is doing a solid job and would continue to do it. He has the advantage that he is professionally involved with school boards in California. His firm writes, I forget the name of the pamphlet, but there's a pamphlet that is legally required, and that's what his firm does. So he's pretty knowledgeable on this. Field Gibson is a Paso Robles board trustee, and he's been very active in educational things as well. And Samuel Shalhoub, of course, is new. He's the newly elected president of the Coast USD. He's attended a number of our meetings. I think he's been pretty well spoken when he does that. I was impressed with his performance at the Coast School Board meeting when I went to it. My preference, I would prefer Mark Buckman. I think that he'll continue to do a good job.
Do we only get one?
Yes.
Yes, we can only vote for one.
Because I really like Samuel Shalhoub.
So I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
I like Samuel Shalhoub. I just think I've seen him just from the.
So certainly, it has 2 attractive elements. It gets a younger person, gets new blood involved. It also gets a different school district involved, because San Luis Coastal is a frequent participant in things of this nature. And I don't know that that Coast has participated recently.
be interesting too, to have a smaller school district representative. But I also agree that, having ties with San Luis Coastal doesn't hurt either.
Do you have any observations? Okay, does somebody want to make a nomination? Or, yeah, does somebody want to move that we nominate, that we vote for one of the candidates
I
listed
will.
here? Okay,
I make a motion that we vote for Mark Buckman for CSBA Delegate Assembly.
is there a second?
I would second that.
So we have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion? Ms. Held, would you tally the vote, please?
Val, that was you seconding.
Yes.
Member Wilson?
Aye.
President Tru?
Aye.
Member Friend?
Aye.
Member Wright?
Aye.
Member Brown?
Okay, so we have decided unanimously to vote for Mark Buckman. The next item on the agenda is entitled 2016-17 Developer Fee Annual Report and 5-Year Plan. This item was submitted by Clerk Friend, so I'll ask her to introduce the topic.
Just reading over the different government codes. I tried to have this on the agenda last meeting. The developer fee plan and report needs to be available for 15 days. I don't see how, as a school board, we can feel like we're being open and transparent to say it was available for 15 days when, as board members, we only received it on the Friday when the board packet was posted, and we approved it Monday. So the fact that, anyone from the public, it was available, if board members don't know, I don't think it's engendering trust with our community members if we just assume, oh yeah, they know it's there. Additionally, the developer fee and report and 5-year plan is supposed to be approved by resolution, which we didn't do, so I'm uncomfortable with that. And there was discussion last month that the 5-year plan's not due till 2019, but we did it anyways, which is true, and which is common that most districts do. However, if we're gonna call it a 5-year plan, just because it's not due till 19, it still needs to be correct. We can't have just kidding, it's not gonna be there. And so my motion to rescind the approval of the plan, and then I would like it to come back next month, because then it would be available for the 15 days. I know last month we talked about postponing the amended report, and we still haven't had an update on that. But I would like to, if you look at, I know there's tons of documents that I gave you, but the document on rescinding, if we made a decision that we look back on and go, oh, that wasn't correct, I think it's very open and transparent if we admit, oh, we did something in error. You know, there's so much going on with developer fees, and there's so much to know that I think it's being more honest with our stakeholders if we just say, oh, we didn't do that, and then do it correctly. So I would like to, now it's rescind the motion from the December meeting that we approved it, and then do it correctly.
Okay, so that's your motion,
Yes.
as stated here. Is there a second to the motion? So I'll ask once more, is there a second to the motion? Having no second, then the motion is, the proposal for a motion is null, but we have no motion. So that's the last item on the open session agenda. And we decided during closed session that we would reconvene after the open session. So the board is going to take a short break